Hi fellow crafters, this is Becky with Flutter and Fibers, and today we are launching a new series with the Chaos Blanket. Now this blanket does not use a pattern, so we are going to use a random selector to choose the yarn color, the stitch type, and the number of rows that we'll be doing in those stitches. Now the interesting thing with this project is that we are going to have 2 spaces on the wheel for a mystery stitch. The mystery about this stitch is that I haven't done them before. So if you are following along and doing your own blanket, we will learn together. Now before we get started, I do want to give you a couple of tips. When you are starting your foundation chain, you'll want to start out with a larger hook than what you are going to use for the actual project based off of the yarns that you have. For example, I'll be using a 5.5mm crochet hook for the project itself. So for the foundation chain, I could either size up to a 6 or a 6.5mm. The reason you do this is because there is a tension difference between that first chain and then your first row of stitches. What ends up happening is that your chain or your beginning section will start to twist. Now you will see on the videos coming up that I forgot about this tip and mine curls. It'll be okay in the end, but really that'll save a lot of hassle for you if you just go ahead and size up for that first row of chains, and then when you get to your first row of stitches, switch back to your normal crochet hook. Another suggestion I have is to start out with a lighter colored yarn, and this enables you to see the stitch definition much easier. So if you're a newer crafter, or if you're just coming back and kind of reminding yourself on the process, this is a great way to start. You can always add in those darker colors later, but now just give yourself some ease and start out with the lighter colors so you can see where you're stitching and in which part of the stitch you're going. So let's get started and see what our first color is going to be. Chili red. This is a great color. It's a nice pigment. It's got some rich tones, but it's not too dark. Now let's go ahead and see which stitch we're going to do. Oh, this is perfect. Using a single stitch will make it easier for you to start out. You can either start out this single stitch on top of your foundation chain, or you can do like I did, do the foundation chain and 1 row of singles, and then start out with your new color. I'll show you that in just a bit. All right, finally, let's take a look and see how many rows we are going to do of that single stitch. Easy peasy, we got 3 rows. We can do this. So if you already know how to do these stitches, you can go ahead, stop the video now, get started. Otherwise, keep rolling with me and I'll show you how it's done. Either way, I hope you like this video. And if you did, please click like, make sure you're subscribed, and click on that bell icon so that you can get the notifications of when the next video comes out. Let's get moving on our project here. I'm going to start out with how to start out your foundation chain. To get set up for this project, the first thing you need to do is to chain 120 stitches, or 120 chains. And I'll explain why as I do this. So the first thing I need to do is make my starting loop here. Now I'm only going to do a few stitches just to show you how this goes. But the reason why I said that we need to do 120 is because some of the stitches that we'll be doing throughout this project require multiples of 3 or an even number. So for that reason, we're doing 120. Now, if you want a longer blanket, you can certainly make your starting chain longer. You just need to, again, make sure that you have multiples of 3. This is just an example of a chain, so all I'm doing is yarning over and pulling through. Yarn over and pull through. Now it just so happens that our first stitch is actually a single stitch, which is what I am going to do to set up this chain. Now, if you would like, you could certainly do this in your starting color. I have another full-size chain that I will show you, but this is just my demonstration. Now, the way that we are doing this is we are going to take our chain and rotate it to the right so that we can see the back. And on the back, you see this single stitch right there, and one right there, and one right there. Those are called the back bumps. And I am going to stitch into that back bump because it will leave those V-stitches intact at the bottom of our blanket. The nice thing about that is it gives it a nice edge, or we also will have clean stitches to do a border should we choose to do one. So to do the single crochet on the back of this chain, I'm going to skip that first bump and start into the second bump. So I'll put my crochet hook right into there. So all I have is one stitch on there. And to do a single stitch, it's really easy. It's so good that we happened to get that one on our first try. I'm just going to yarn over and bring it through that first loop so that we have 2 loops on the hook, and then yarn over again, and we're going to pull it through those 2 loops. For those of you who are new, what you might notice is when I go to pull it through, I do take this bottom part between my thumb and my middle finger. So let's try that again. There's that next bump right there. So I'm going to put my hook through the bump, and then I'm going to yarn over. I'll pull my hook through just the bump first, so I have 2 loops, and then pull through both. I'm going to do a couple more of these here, and if you need to, you can go into the settings in YouTube and slow down. Oh, I want to point out something to you. I'm actually looking at this through my camera, so I didn't aim quite right, and you see I didn't get the whole stitch of the yarn, so I'm going to gently back out of there, and I'm just going to straighten it out a little bit, and this time I will grab all of the strands. There we go. Got it. So yarn over, pull through once, yarn over, pull through both. There we go. I'm going to do just a couple more so I can show you the effect at the end. I need one yarn over, pull through once. You know what? I need to back up because I wasn't paying attention. And that will happen. This is the back loop, this big one. So I'm going to go through, yarn over the first time, bring it through once, yarn over, bring it through both. So now you can start to see that we have the nice V-stitches at the top, and we have nice V-stitches at the bottom for our final. So that is how we're going to start out. As I said, you are welcome to do this in your first color. Next, I will show you how to do a color change if you choose to do your foundation in a different color like I did. Here we are with the 120 stitches that I've already made in my chain, and I also did the foundation row in the same neutral color by working into that back loops, or excuse me, the bottom bump. So you can see here, there is the V's from the bottom and the V's from the top. I want to show you how I am going to switch out the colors here. I had done this part before I drew for the second color, so I had gotten to the end and just stopped there. But in order to make it a better color transition, I'm actually going to pull this And I'm going to pull out my last stitch so I can show you this. So put my hook back into that second to the last one. We'll start the stitch normal. So again, this is where I'd gone into that back bump. So there's the last back bump. I'm going to put mine into there. And what we want to do is we're going to yarn over and start that first pull through. With 2 loops on my hook, I am going to bring in my next color here, which is the red that was chosen by the picker. And put that over the hook. And then I'm pulling this through as if this was that last step to finish that single crochet. So you'll see here, I'll just pull this through. And then I will go to my working yarn, which is this long one under here, and just give it a little tug to tighten it up. There we go. So now I'm going to actually start my row for the single crochet that was chosen by the picker. When you're doing this, if you chose to use your first color for this, you will have already completed your first row in the single crochet, so you wouldn't have to do this step. But if you want to do one like I've already done and then work your first single crochet in another color, this is how you do it. So we're going to pull in. I'm going to do 1 single crochet because that is going to be my turn. So now I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to start in the second crochet from the hook. Now you'll notice I need to turn this a little bit because I am looking for those V stitches. And right here, that's not the V stitch. There's the V stitch. So for a little bit, at least until it turns nicely for us, we'll just have to angle it a little bit better. So I'm going to insert my hook into both the front and the back loop of that V right there. So I've got those 2 on there. I am going to pull it through once and then pull it there. Let's do that again. I'll put it through both and that V. Pull through, whoop, pull through once, pull through. I'll just keep going here. Go into those 2 stitches, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Now you notice this is a little bit different than it was when we were working in that back loop because of course the back loop only had 1 stitch. Whereas here when we pull it up, we're going through both that front and back loop there instead of just the bottom loop. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Just like that. Again, going through both those loops, which those loops you can find easily. You don't always have to turn it over like this and look at the loops because if you notice, I'll try to get this here. You can see my finger through that. There's that little hole. That little hole is the opening. So right there. But you can do it however it works best for you. If you need to turn it over so you can see, that's totally fine. But once you get the hang of it, I think you'll be able to just do it from the side. So again, right there. Yarn over, pull through 1. Yarn over, pull through 2. So I'm going to continue doing this until I get to the very end. Again, if you want yours to be longer, you can make your chain, the original chain, you can make it as many stitches as you want and then kind of hold it out. And then you just make sure that it is in a multiple of 3. So we'll keep going here and I'll see you at the end. I've reached the end of my first of 3 rows of this brick red, and as you can see here, I have been putting a place marker or a stitch marker every 20 stitches. Now, you don't need to do every 20. I actually went back and counted and added the stitches later just to confirm that I have 120. But you can break that up however you want to into 40. It's up to you. What this does is it helps you ensure that you have not missed a spot, which with a single crochet, it's generally not that hard to keep track of. Plus, honestly, because there's such a contrast between these two colors, it's easy to see. So now that I've reached the end, you can see I also have a stitch marker in my final one. That is helpful to do at both ends so that when you get to the end, you make sure that you are in fact in that last stitch, and that will prevent you from getting the diagonal lines from your rows from becoming shorter each time. Now, to finish off this row and then go into the second row, I first need to remove my stitch marker and just, there are lots of different stitch markers you can get. I like these just because there's not much for them to catch on except for that top loop. But you could also get something like these if you like a little more decorative or easy, like these. The one thing I would caution with these is if you do have a tighter stitch like I do, this one would tend to be a little bit big and you don't want to stretch out your stitches. But this one's okay. And even if you don't have it, you could also just use a strand of either a coordinating yarn, or it could be the same too. Then you would just stitch that into your first one and you can easily pull it out. So let's move from there onto our last stitch. So I'm going to turn it over because now I can easily see that V. I'm going to put my hook in, insert one, and since I'm still using the same color because we're doing 3 rows, then I can go ahead and yarn over and pull through to finish off my stitch there. Now first I'm going to chain 1, as that is our turn, and then I'm going to just flip this over so that finished row is now on my left side. Let's move this over here. There we go. So essentially we've already worked into the first stitch, and so now I'm going to go back into the second. So again, you can't see my finger through there quite as easily because it's darker, but we are going into the V, we're going under both of them, which is actually this little space right here. So put it in, yarn over, pull through both. Insert, yarn over once, pull through once. And I will continue doing this for 2 more rows because that is what came up on the spinner. So I'll keep working here and I'll see you at the end. Here's a lesson learned. When I got to the end of the first row here and I looped back around for the second, I moved my stitch marker up, but I forgot to put a stitch marker on the first stitch. Now, this is the reason why it's helpful to use the stitch markers, is because rather than having to count all the way through to 120 or however many stitches you did in your chain, now I can just go from here. So I know this is 20. So I'm going to start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So 20 is right here. Now I can go back and get my stitch stitch marker in there. And see, this would have been a whole lot easier had I done this in the very beginning, but this just goes to show that even if you miss something initially, we can go back and fix it. And these kinds of projects are not meant to be perfect. So if you've made mistakes, it's okay. You can either frog it, which means ripping out the stitches, or you can just ignore it and let it be imperfect, which is completely fine as well. There we go, there's my first stitch. I've reached the end of my row. So this is the 3 rows of red that came up for today in the single stitch. Now, I have a couple of choices here. I can either leave this yarn attached with the large ball, or I could cut a decent amount here and just keep that on hand so that I can weave it in later. The reason I say this, I don't want to fasten this red off because when we come back with our next color, I will remove this one, have the 2 loops so we can do that nice color change. If you have any questions about that, just let me know. Did you make it all the way to the end with me? Fantastic. Please, if you are doing this blanket along with me, send me pictures, put them in the comments. I'd love to see your progress as we go along. There are a lot of great tutorials and resources online. So if you need a little additional help or you want to see these taught in a different way, I'm going to put some links to additional videos in the description below so that you can have what you need to get yourself started on your own chaos blanket. Thanks again for joining me in this video. Please like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you'll be ready for the next one. We'll see you next week. Bye. Hi, fellow Hi, fellow crafters. Welcome back to Flutter and Fibers. I'm Becky. That's not what I say either. Hi, fellow crafters. This is Becky with Flutter and Fibers, and today we are launching a new series. For example, I'm using a 5.5 mil. This enables you to see the stitch definition much easier than if you're using a very dark colored yarn like a black or a... Another suggestion is to use a lighter colored yarn. This enables you to see the stitch definition. There are a lot of great resources online and some